welcome to the Most Excellent 80s Movies podcast. It's the podcast where a filmmaker, a comedian, and their wonderful guests seize the day and carpe diem our way through the 80s movies we think we love or might have missed with these our modern grown-up eyes to see how they hold up. And today we're talking about Dead Poets Society, a movie selection from 1989, about which Google says a new English teacher, John Keating, is introduced to an all-boys preparatory school that is known for its ancient traditions and high standards. He uses unorthodox methods to reach out to his students who face enormous pressures from their parents and the school. With Keating's help, students Neil Perry and Todd Anderson and others learn to break out of their shells, pursue their dreams, and seize the day. And that's all that they describe for the movie Dead Poet Society. I'm Chrissy Lenz, improv comedian and director of the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona. And with me today is
the master of protracted self-introductions, Nathan Blackwell, also a filmmaker.
And I'm Megan Hughes-Rini, an actor, director, teacher, educator / woman of many talents.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Star of our favorite micro-budget feature film, The Last Movie Ever Made.
Oh, tell me more.
We're so excited to have you, Megan. Have you seen the Dead Poet Society before?
Yes, many times actually. When I was really young, I was a favorite.
Yeah, for me too. I think for young girls, it's a bit of a dreamy movie. As sad as it is, there's a whole lot that happens before it gets real sad.
Mm-hmm.
What about for you, Nathan?
This is the second time I've seen the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's. I always look back on it fondly. So it's not like, oh well, all right, wasn't my thing. It's like sometimes there's movies that emotionally affect you that you might not return to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for whatever reason, but yeah, I think the last time I saw this, I rented it on VHS.
Oh boy.
So it's been a while.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that I remembered. There's also a lot I didn't remember.
Mm-hmm.
So
what jumps out to you as something that was new this time?
It was really more about the individual characters. Like I had forgotten how much, like how was like if you had asked me, was Ethan Hawke the main character? I would have said yes.
Yeah.
But this time around, no, not really. Like he doesn't have a lot of screen time. He
No.
in a lot of ways, he's the witness to the transformation that the other characters have.
Right.
And it's interesting. You occasionally get these characters, and where a lot of the boys are going through wild, big transformations and big risks. You have like the younger kid who is not ready to make that commitment, and then to make the climax like big and exciting, they make the turn, they make the transformation towards the commitment of the, it's like any of these things, it's like, the theme, which is like, this thing is good, and the anti-theme, no, that's bad. And so in a lot, especially in dramas, like it's an argument between them. This is a movie about, like, right off the bat, we immediately understand that this is okay in the past. It's like, it's about conformity. It's about, boom, they hit us like with a giant banner that says tradition.
Yeah.
Oh wow, there's a lot of white boys in here. It's like, it's very kind of like pre-Ivy League, and it's all about like pressure and conformity, and we get all that like in the first like few minutes.
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
That is where we start with candle lighting and bagpipes playing and young boys chanting the 4 pillars of excellence at Welton Academy, which is, as they say, the best preparatory school in the United States. They've got a new teacher this year, Mr. Keating,
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams.
Was this like his first dramatic role?
Was it? Should we look?
This was pretty early on.
He did seem so much younger to me this time.
Oh yeah,
I know.
absolutely.
I mean, it was crazy to me how young he seemed.
There are some people who always seem like they've been adults, and you can
Right.
see the young man in him, even though he's probably like in his mid-30s.
I'm sure a lot of that is having aged myself.
So yeah, this is pretty early on in Robin Williams's career. And I would say that even though it's a dramatic role, he still brings lots of comedy to it. His take, this would be a different movie if it was anyone other than Robin Williams playing that role.
Yeah,
Doing
it's one of the things that makes him so lovable, really relatable to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
What about this one, The World According to Garp?
Oh yeah,
Is that dramatic?
yeah, but it's also a little kind of like
comedy drama,
comedy-ish, weirdish. It's got like a certain Forrest Gumpy, like going throughout time and doing weird things. Not literally time, but been a while.
Robin Williams is obviously a brilliant comedic genius, but I love him in his dramatic roles as well. Like the fact that he is so funny and has such range, I think, just opens him up to have like a big depth of seriousness that you when you get to peek into it, it's a real treat.
Yeah, he like in Good Will Hunting and this, you can sense like the darkness, and you can sense the depth and you can sense like the sadness. And that's one of the things he brings.
Yeah. Well, and I think the best comedy comes from a place of truth too. So he what he portrays or what he brings out is a really strong authenticity. And I think that when you're watching him either in a funny role or in a serious role, that I think stands out, and it really helps you relate to him as a character. And I think it probably helps all of his castmates too, really.
So we meet the people of Welton Academy. We meet all the boys and their study group. We meet Neil, and Neil is trying to ingratiate. Neil is Robert Sean Leonard, and he's like the main boy, I would say.
Yes, the main boy.
The main boy.
He plays main boy.
He is reaching out to Todd, who's played by Ethan Hawke, who we learn is like this quiet, shy, little mousy secondary boy. And he's trying to include him in the study group and trying to get him to be a good roommate and stuff. We meet Neil's father, who's Red from that 70s show, who is playing just a real
piece of work.
A real piece of work. That's the way to say it. He comes into the boys' room and tells Neil that he has to drop his school annual where he is supposed to be the assistant editor because he's taking too many. He's decided that Neil has too many extracurriculars, so he has to drop out of the school annual so that he can better focus on his studies. And you just get the sense immediately from this interaction that Neil's father controls his whole entire life.
Yeah, and it's probably and at this school, it's not out of the ordinary at all. Like you very early on get a sense that all these kids are under just like a vice of pressure.
Yeah. Well, even Ethan Hawke's character, his brother was valedictorian previously at the school. So
yeah.
I thought that scene was such a good beginning of the introduction, because even the other boys are like, "You can't don't let him do that to you," and he's like, "Oh yeah, like you would do anything about it
Mhm.
if your father told you you had to
Mhm.
drop the annual." Like, it's really quite sad, but we get the right sense that these are boys who are Mr. Future Lawyer and Mr. Future Banker. They're just
Mhm.
living to meet the expectations of their parents. We meet all the teachers. They're all very serious, even though it's the first day of school. They're all like very, very serious and assigning homework and being
Mhm.
um,
And
buttheads.
very, very old. They're all very,
Very
very, very
old.
old.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's um yeah, you see all the teachers and you can just see like the old man white lineage. Like you almost expect there to be like a scene where they, there's like a um what are they like a private secret society like the Shriners or
Like the skulls.
the no, not the Skulls but the Freemasons, you know. Um
Yeah.
and it's very much kind of like the old scholarly tradition to where even like we see a peak of I think that one of the things that that really sells it is getting like a minute in each of these other classes of like
Hmm.
trigonometry and history, and that sets us up to how different Robin Williams class is going to be.
Mhm.
Yeah. He leads the boys out of the room whistling and takes them into the like school lobby and
Hmm.
has them look at all the old pictures of the boys that came before them. And it's inspiring interlude number 1 with Mr. Keating, or for the slightly more daring, "Oh Captain, my Captain." And immediately they're like, "This is going to be different than the other kids. He's going to tells them to seize the day and make their lives extraordinary." And this is his first class with them. And then the boys are all like, "Do you think he's going to test us on this stuff?"
That scene was really impactful for me. I was, like,
Yeah.
sitting there watching it, and I don't even really remember it the first time, but now I mean, after watching it, I've thought about it many times and just because he was saying all these young boys were once where you are today, and now they're gone, like, they're worm
Hmm.
food, you know?
Hmm.
And that idea that everything is just temporary, but at that age, especially, everything feels so serious, so immediate, so important. And I think we still get caught up in that in our daily lives sometimes, and so that's a good reminder, something to think about.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
even though it's been so long ago, like that's where I learned the phrase "carpe diem," you
Yeah,
know,
Hmm.
and the importance of it.
yeah. It just is like he's really teaching them these lessons that I think are so essential. Like, I want my kids to learn these lessons, you know?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
he's jumping in on day 1.
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Boom. Yeah,
Mind blown, boys.
it's like it's really the difference between teaching a science or teaching an exact science that is like history or math or any of these other subjects, and teaching them art, you
Mhm.
know, and
Hmm.
teaching them something that's supposed to engage them emotionally. And it's like that introduction that they rip out. The whole introduction is about looking at poetry analytically, to
Mhm.
look at it and put the poem that you just read on a graph. It's like, okay, how successful was it? How, quote, emotional was it, etc., etc. Good. Now I've placed it on a graph. Now you have successfully consumed a poem, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's that desire to want to control, that I think comes
Hmm.
from so much of society, and you see that from the white hairs, at the school. They
Yeah.
wanna be in control of everything and finding a way to sort of fit everything within a box, and unfortunately, art just doesn't or fortunately, art just doesn't work that way, you know?
No,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Unfortunately for them.
Yes.
Mhm.
And the message that he's trying to get across to them, and that he says in this their first real lesson where they rip out the pages, is that poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. So being a lawyer, being a banker, these are all important pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But the poetry and the beauty is what you live for. It's the point of living. And for all of these boys, the point of living is just the getting the grade, just to getting to the end, just to be the lawyer and the banker and to be the success. So he's trying to say, like, but what's the point of all that if you can't find a moment of beauty and love?
Mhm.
The other teachers are not on board with this. There's one teacher in particular who says, don't encourage them to be artists. When they find out they're not artists, they'll hate you for it. And he's like, well, I just want them to be free thinkers. And they're all like, free thinkers at 17. Ho, 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 ho. Yes. So the boys find an old school annual and they read up on Mr. Keating and find out that he was part of something called the Dead Poets Society. They track him down and ask him what was it, and here we get inspiring speech number 3.
Mhm.
He said they would read poetry together in the old abandoned Indian cave, and gods were created those nights. So Neil wants to go and do a Dead Poets. Let's do it. Let's go do a Dead Poets.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like this is a lot of this movie is kind of a reverse telling of Harry Potter. of like when they do the Dumbledore's army,
Right.
it's like, oh, Dumbledore did this, we're gonna do this, and Mr. Keating doesn't know they're going off into a cave and reenacting his old poetry society,
But he
but
does give Neil the book.
Mm-hmm.
He gives Neil the Dead Poets book.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
he maybe does know.
Yeah, I think, or he assumes or he hopes that they will. And I just love that this is their like biggest form of rebellion is they're going to go off into a cave and read poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
It's pretty amazing.
Uh-huh.
They have to sneak out to go to this cave. So at Dead Poets Society meeting number 1, they read the Walt Whitman poem. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, and not when I had come to die discover that I had not lived. They have snacks. They're like, everybody cough up your snacks. And they're just like moose cookies on the cave floor. And they tell ghost stories to each other, and they just spend a delightful evening in the cave entertaining each other. We go back to Keating's class. He's telling them about Shakespeare and making it more fun, doing Robin Williams impressions of what if John Wayne was doing Macbeth. And he tells them that they have to stand on his desk to change perspectives. So every time you think you've got a handle on something, you have to change your perspective and see it in a new way. And he gives them an assignment that they have to write a poem to recite in class, which scares Ethan Hawke's character to death.
Mm-hmm.
We get a montage of them doing stuff, and then all of a sudden Neil wants to be in A Midsummer Night's Dream. He wants to act. He's been inspired to do what he wants to do, and what he wants to do is act in a play, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Todd is being a naysayer. What if you'll have to tell your father, you'll never get away with it. Just ask him first. And Neil's like, no, I'd rather ask forgiveness than permission, which is probably wise.
If he actually wants to do it.
Yeah. And Neil encourages Todd to try and come out of his shell a little bit. Meanwhile, one of our other friendly characters, Knox Overstreet, has been falling in love with a girl named Chris. And he rides his bike to a football game to try and be with her. But she's, of course, dating a football player. So he's got this unrequited love thing happening, which is our B story.
Mm-hmm.
Knox Overstreet is in love with a girl named Chris.
Just a little creepy.
Just a little creepy.
Only if it doesn't work out. That's the movie rule, apparently, right?
Is it? I mean, sure.
Yeah. Most romantic plots in movies are problematic, or in fiction,
Yeah.
shall we say? Because I don't think movies invented them. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's
Oh,
just all
sure.
I watch or I consume, so that's all I know. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's a sidetrack. But yeah, I think most romantic stories, if they didn't turn out well, are generally pretty creepy and stalkery.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, Knox gets pretty stalkery later in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw it in a different light than I did the first time, I
Mhm.
think, like, as a young person watching this, I didn't, and I don't know how much of that was my age or sort of how things have changed in our society as well in terms of, our acceptance slash, no longer acceptance of, certain ideas that it's okay to sort of, um, you know,
Smooch someone who's
force
sleeping.
yourself. Yes. So, anyway, yes, we could talk more about that later,
Mhm.
but
Yes, but for now, for the 1950s, for the Dead Poet Society, for the 1989, it's cute. He loves her. He met
yeah.
her once at a dinner with her boyfriend, and he loves her. We get the Keating class where he has them recite the poetry and kick the soccer balls. That's one of my favorite parts, where he's like, we read the line of the poetry and kick the soccer ball. It's, I think, really nice. Neil gets the part of Puck. He forges a letter from his dad and Mr. Nolan, giving himself permission to be in the play, which seems pretty easy. He just types it on the typewriter.
Mhm.
I give my permission. So then we get the scene where they're reading their poems, and Knox reads his poem for Chris, and the reluctant boy reads his poem. The cat sat on the mat, and Mr. Anderson, Todd, Ethan Hawke didn't write a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And this inspires Mr. Keating to get him to write a poem on the spot.
Mhm.
He writes on the board, I sound my barbaric yop from the rooftops of the world. And at first he gets Todd to just yop. He's trying to get him to yop and get his yop out. And then he sort of forces him to write himself a poem by looking at Walt Whitman.
Well, I think interestingly too is that we know that Todd has been writing poems this whole time and just never
Mhm.
thought they were ever good enough. So I
Mhm.
think that that's kind of a fun sort of revelation for him, fun revelation. But yeah, it's a great one because you can really see that he is a creative mind and has just been stifled basically.
Yeah, and it's a really moving scene, but it's a little bit awkward as well because Robin Williams is really forcing Ethan Hawke to burst through
Mm-hmm.
his bubble, and it's a little painful.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Like looking through the, because I think we all have teaching experience. To look at this through the lens of being a teacher. You know,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and how you interact with the students. You know.
Yeah. I mean, that could have failed miserably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel Robin Williams' character rides the line of inspiring them or maybe being too unorthodox?
Well, the movie wants us to believe that all of his unorthodox behavior was to the good, you know.
Yeah.
But I think this scene is a little bit like he's putting too much pressure on Todd, and it does go well because it's a movie. But like he could have like scared the shit out of that kid, and
Mhm.
really traumatized him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly wouldn't do something like that in my classroom.
No, it's like,
No.
all right, well, you're obviously gonna fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the most part he doesn't really cross the line of too unconventional, too, or anything that's too
Mhm.
radical. Unlike some movies we've seen, and I can't think of any specific. I have the vague, cloudy memory of seeing some of these where you get the revolutionary teacher who is gonna. It's probably Harry Potter. Let's be honest. But where they try to break the mold so hard that, like, the kid could literally die in this in this test. It's like, brew up some poison, everyone, like some living death. Oh, good job.
Yeah, you did great.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are certain things too that we see as an audience watching the film that we know that this is going to be successful. Knowing that Todd has been working on this poem this whole time, knowing that he really wants to break out. But Robin Williams does not know that as the teacher. He's not, an all-seeing God watching everything from above. So yeah, it's dangerous. It's a dangerous attempt, I would say. I'm glad that it works out in the film, but yeah,
right.
not. And and the other thing too that Robin Williams doesn't really know that we know is that these boys are all very close to one another. Like, even though it's only been a few months that Todd's been there, there's a comfort, and there's a familiarity with all of the students in the room where I mean, Robin Williams might know a bit of that, having been a student there himself, but at the end of the day, when you're asking a student to get up in front of their classmates and perform something on the fly, like, you really, you don't know what their situation or relationship is with the other students, and putting that pressure on someone is pretty intense.
Yeah, there's a reason people fear public speaking more than death.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we get the second Dead Poet Society movie. We get the second Dead Poet Society meeting. Charlie plays his saxophone, and Knox reveals that if he can't have Chris, he's going to die. He's going to die if he can't have her. So they all run back into the school, and he calls her on the phone, and she invites him to a party, and he's like, "She was thinking about me." Oh. Keating's class, they do the class where they walk around, and he's like, "Find your own footsteps, boys. Don't fall into the rhythm with the others." It's Todd's birthday. He gets a desk set. He gets the same desk set as he's already got. And Neil and he throw it off the roof. Dead Poet Society meeting number 3. Charlie brings girls. And declares that he will be from now on known as Nwanda.
Yeah, so this is where we really start to get big transformation from some of the characters. Like, at this point, they're now radical. Some of them are radical, or definitely have taken the free thinking boat, and they're totally on that page, and they're testing their boundaries, and they're we're seeing the train coming down the track of how this is all, because right now they're still in their bubble, they're still in their world, and they're all energized by this, but we're just now seeing that the consequences of interacting with their environment are coming.
Yes. So we're cutting between the third Dead Poet Society movie where there's girls and he's reading them poetry and pretending he wrote the poetry, and the party where Knox is getting drunk and everyone's making out around him, and he ends up sitting on the couch with a passed out Chris basically in his lap. He gets busted because he's like leaning over her, petting her like a kitty,
kissing her forehead.
Kissing her forehead. And her boyfriend and all the other jocks like beat the crap out of him and like, stay away from her, which is like they're sort of coming to her rescue in a way. Like,
they don't know that, but
I'm on their side.
Yeah. I mean, if he hadn't been stopped, what would have happened?
I know. He's gonna like make out with her.
Oh God. I want to like him, so.
They all just got too drunk at this party, which is like, is he not going to get in like big time trouble for that when he goes back to school?
Good question.
But apparently he doesn't. But speaking of getting in trouble, Charlie published an article in the school newspaper about letting girls into Welton. Everybody gets in trouble. They're having a little meeting, and Charlie gets a phone call from God wanting them to let girls into Welton. And rather than give up the Dead Poets Society, he gets paddled on the ass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty extreme. I didn't know that they were
Yes.
doing that to high schoolers.
Yeah.
Mr. Keating and Nolan have a little confrontation, and he's like, don't let these boys think for themselves. And Mr. Keating's like, I thought we were supposed to be teaching them to think for themselves. And he's like, no, we need to stop them from thinking for themselves. Nuwanda is telling the story of getting his ass beat by Nolan. And Keating comes in and tells him to be cautious. He says, you need to be cautious, be daring, but don't be stupid and get yourself thrown out of school. Keep your head about you. What did you guys think of that scene of Mr. Keating being like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa?
Yeah,
Chill.
really interesting. Yeah.
I liked it. I think it was a really another good sort of teaching moment, because I think it's true, like to an extent, as an artist or as a free thinker, you need to be willing to take these huge risks. But if you take it too far, people won't listen to you. There won't be change. Nothing,
Mhm.
nothing will come of it, because you'll be seen as being too radical or too out there or too
Mhm.
silly or stupid. So I think there was. I felt like that was the greater message there when he was
Yeah.
speaking to them.
It's interesting because you are siding with the kids. You're wanting them to rebel.
Hmm.
And you want Robin Williams to say, yes, you're doing exactly what I wanted. But he's dialing it down. It's like, look, don't burn your boat down in the middle of the ocean,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah. To get what they want, they have to be able to stay within this environment that they're in, in order to sort of continue to live their lives and they want to seize the day, but they want to do it within this world, right? And so in
Mhm.
order to stay within this world, you do have to abide by certain rules and certain standards that yeah, they're pushing those boundaries, but they don't want to completely destroy their chances of being able to continue to push the boundaries.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
he still wants them to graduate, and then when they're adults, they can kind of do whatever
Mhm.
they want.
Mhm.
So Neil is going to rehearsal, but his father finds out and comes to the school and
Yeah.
is very mad and says, you cannot do this play. You will not let me down. You're out of the play. And Neil's like, but it's tomorrow. And he's like, I don't care.
Mhm.
Which is, I the whole time made me think, like, what about his
Mhm.
commitment? He made a commitment. You're trying to teach him to honor his commitments. He's gonna let all these people down if he has to drop out of the play. Neil's
Mhm.
dad doesn't care. Neil goes to see Mr. Keating, and Mr. Keating says, you need to talk to your dad and tell him what you've told me, that acting is your passion and that you just really need to do this. And if you tell him the way you told me, he'll be persuaded and it'll all go your way. Knox goes to see Chris at her school with flowers and a poem, which is so embarrassing for her. He breaks into her classroom and reads a poem to her in front of her whole
Mhm.
school. Neil says to Keating that he talked to his dad and his dad said it was okay for him to do the play, which is a straight up lie.
Mhm. Where do we think he went? Like, that was something I was because we see him
Mhm.
getting on his bike and riding, right? Or no? Was that Knox?
That was Knox.
Okay.
I think he just pretended. I don't think he like
Yeah.
even was gonna ever talk to his dad.
Go
Mhm.
anywhere. Yeah.
Right, like he put on like a fake voice, boom, boom, hello, Dad, and then people are like listening in the hall. It's like, his dad's here.
So the boys are getting ready to go to the play. Chris comes to the school and she agrees to go to the play with Knox. She's trying to tell him to back off, but she agrees to go to the play with him. And he's like, look, just go to the play with me. And if you don't like me, I'll back off forever. But if you do like me, we'll figure out what this thing is all about. She's like, "You're so obnoxious." She says no, meaning yes.
Basically, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
"You're so obnoxious. Come hold my hand and walk me to the play." Uh,
Just to go back really quickly for 1 second about the whole Neil lying to Mr. Keating. In that one scene where he, like, tells Mr. Keating that he went and talked to his dad, and his dad told him that he could do it, isn't it just so obvious that Neil is lying?
oh, so obvious.
And Mr. Keating just goes along with it. Like, I
Mhm.
feel like that would have been, as an educator, right, one of those really important moments to sort of push back
Uh-huh.
against and really sort of do a little more digging there. I mean, that's one of the places where I think the movie loses me just a little bit because, I mean, I don't know.
Mhm.
Anyway, it was a troublesome spot for me.
It was. It was a real sticky wicket. And we see Keating understand that he's lying, but not know what to do about it.
Right.
So we see the play. The costumes are terrible, but the play is great.
Mm-hmm. They're
Uh,
era accurate.
yes. Neil is great as Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream. He gets a standing ovation. Everyone's like, "Oh, he's so wonderful. He's so magical." Everyone in the play is like excited to see him. But Red from That 70s Show is there.
Mm.
He watches the play and is unmoved.
Mhm.
At the end, he grabs Neil and drags him away. Mr. Keating is like, "Hey, this is so great. Thank you for letting him do it." And Mr. Perry is like, "Stay away from my son."
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's where you can kind of see that, okay, now the adults, now that they're aware of what these kids are doing, they're going to start pinning it on Robin
Mr.
Williams.
Keating, yeah.
Yep.
Well, and, Neil even uses Shakespeare's own text to speak directly to his father during the play. It was a
Hmm.
really lovely moment.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
I enjoyed.
it's really good. The
And,
play within the play is pretty great.
uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so I was in Midsummer Night's Dream when I was in high school, and, I definitely watched this movie around that time. I don't know if it was the first time that I watched the movie or not, but I remember thinking, Puck is not the lead in that play.
Yeah, Puck is not the lead.
I was like, I wouldn't want to be Puck. Like, I wanted to be Hermia or Helena, like,
Yeah.
but I digress.
Mm-mm.
I would
He
love
just
to be
has
Puck
the
now.
beginning and the
But
end. Yes,
yeah.
it's the most fun part,
Yes.
but it's not the lead.
It's not really much of a play that has a lead, really. It's very
Right.
much an ensemble cast anyway.
Mhm. So at Neil's home, they basically tell him that because he was in one play one time, they're going to take him out of Welton Academy and put him in a military school,
Just like Bill
Unbelievable.
and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
just
So
like Bill
intense.
and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which seems pretty harsh.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to his mom, "I was good. I was really good." So then we get this is where the sad part happens. Neil is all in shadow. He opens his windows and puts on his crown. His shadow goes downstairs. We see him holding onto a key. He opens a drawer. He takes out a gun. The dad wakes up. What was that sound? Neil is dead. Neil has killed himself. Oh boy.
Mhm.
Oh boy. Charlie wakes up Todd. They run out into the snow. "Oh, it's so beautiful out here." He throws up. He runs away. He says it was his father. His father did it. Neil would have never done that. Mr. Keating cries over the Dead Poets Society book. They're all singing at a church service and saying how sad they are to have lost Neil. But the point is that Mr. Nolan is going to do a full inquest into this matter at the request of Neil's family.
Yeah, this is when it becomes a witch hunt.
Mhm.
Yep. So the Dead Poets Society get together. They know that Cameron, their weakest link, is going to fink. He does indeed. He says they're not after us. They're after Mr. Keating. I say let Keating fry. Nuwanda punches Cameron in the face, and he says, "You can save yourselves, but you can't save Keating." So the movie has taken an abrupt left turn at this point.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, there was that one of the things that points to the really how well written this film is, I think, is that Cameron, I don't know if you remember in the very beginning, first scenes of the film, he wasn't like an original member of the group. You know, he sort of comes into Neil's room and is like, "Hey, are we gonna hang out this year?" basically, and he says, "Yeah, you can be part of the group." And then there's that moment where then they're all in the room together, and he's like, "Well, I told Cameron he could join us," basically. And then now Cameron is that sort of, yeah, the weak link that snitched. If everything maybe would have been different if Cameron hadn't joined them, there was that moment. So I thought that was like, I had that sort of revelation when I was watching it this time.
He's the wormtail of their group.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
to stick with Nathan's Harry Potter metaphor.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, basically, they question all the boys. They already know everything because Cameron has told them. They have him sign a form saying that Mr. Keating is responsible.
And they handle this scene really well, like dramatically. Like beforehand, so we're taking the point of view of Ethan Hawke's character, and we think, okay, he's going to go in, and this is going to be the big inspirational moment where he tells everyone off. But he goes in, and boom, immediately his parents are sitting there. So suddenly that's that new level. And then also they know everything. They just misinterpret it.
Right.
They already know about the Dead Poet Society. They know every single member. They know what they did. And they just want him to corroborate and sign this and say it was Keating who encouraged you. And he looks at the thing and everyone has signed.
Yep.
Yep.
You really don't, you get the impression he doesn't really have a choice at that point.
But we do get a sort of nice moment where Keating is packing up his bags. He's been fired. He's upstairs packing his bags. And we see the teacher who told him originally not to let the boys be free thinkers leading his boys in their Latin class out on the ground. So he's like, oh, he has had an impact on the other teachers as well. He's walking them around. He's letting them get some air. He's being a little bit more unconventional. Keating has had an impact on the teachers as well. I thought that was a nice thing I noticed in this watch through that I hadn't noticed before. Back in English class, Mr. Nolan is teaching now, and he's like, let's read that really great essay that we all love about how to put the poems on a graph.
Uh-huh.
And so they're all like, we ripped out that page.
I love that part.
Taking so much joy into it, too.
Yeah. Let's read the excellent essay by Mr. Pritchett on how to analyze the poems. Mr. Keating comes to get his personal things.
Of course, it had to be right then.
Yes, he had to come during class.
Oh, is this a bad time? Is this a bad time?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I can come back if it's a bad time.
Todd calls out to him, they made us sign the paper. We didn't want to, Mr. Keating. We didn't want you to get fired. And he's like, that's okay. And then we get this sort of chaotic scene of Mr. Nolan being like, leave, Mr. Keating, and Mr. Keating not leaving. And then all the boys being
I'll leave very slowly.
I'll leave very, very slowly.
It's like, I am leaving. One little step at a time.
Look, I'm leaving.
Oh, Captain, my captain, says Todd as he stands on his desk. Oh, Captain, my captain, says another student as he stands on his desk. And then one by one, about half the students say, oh, Captain, my captain, and they stand on their desks.
And I'm glad that it wasn't all the students.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
There's a bad version of this movie. Like, there's been bad versions of this movie, even, not like a literal remake. And it's like everyone stands is the bad version,
Yeah.
Yep.
Instead, we need to know the faces of the people who stand. It's like, oh, that guy, he didn't seem like he was into it. Oh, that makes us feel emotions,
Yeah, exactly. The most reluctant kid stands on his desk, and he doesn't say, oh, Captain, my captain, but he stands on his desk.
Yeah. The bad version of this movie is too magical with its inspiration, and it doesn't have the realism that this movie has,
And that's the end. Thank you, boys, says Mr. Keating, and out he goes. That's the end. I remember watching this in my English class when I was in high school, and them really analyzing the scene where Neil kills himself and saying, "What does it mean that he's all in shadow? What does it mean that his dad is turning on the lights everywhere, but doesn't turn the lights on in his room?" And it just like really analyzing that part
Hmm.
to death.
Huh.
That's great.
All right, so
Ooh, uh-huh.
anything that we didn't hit or cover that we want to discuss? All right. What on a scale of one book of poetry to 10?
No. Where
Poetry.
on the graph
We're on the ground.
Where on the graph,
is
on the
this?
Pritchett graph, on
Hmm.
a scale of 1 to 10, rating its importance and its perfection,
Yes. Where?
where on the graph does Dead Poet Society land?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Is
Mm.
it? I'm going to come
Uh-huh.
out of the gate and give it a 10.
Wow.
I
Mhm.
think this is a beautiful movie. I wouldn't change anything about it. I think it is, as much as the B story with the girl and Knox Overstreet doesn't hold up. I think the rest of it holds up beautifully. And this is a timeless classic that we should show to future generations and should be watched in English classes and should be
Yeah.
taught to kids. So I give it a 10 on the Pritchard
Well,
scale.
and I would even say, like, in that situation with Knox, like, it's still a reflection of what can happen and what happens. I think it still feels
Mhm.
very real. And as
Mhm.
far as it, like, not holding up in terms of us being like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," you're still rooting for him the whole time,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know? You're like, "You shouldn't do that because you that's not," but
Uh-huh. And
he's
part of us is being adults saying, that's a bad move, kid. you
Yeah.
know?
right, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would give it a 9, 9.5. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I thought my rating was high, but which is 8.5 books of poetry.
Mm.
Okay.
I
I
felt like
think it's low.
yeah, now I feel like the asshole. Great,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. You're the
Um,
Cameron of this
yeah.
group.
Look, I still stood on the desk, okay? Like
Okay.
8.5 is pretty respectable. Yeah. I guess, I think we've said this before, like anything that's like an 8 and above didn't do anything wrong,
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's just how it resonates with you perfectly. Like
Yeah.
maybe I felt like the middle of the movie was a little slow.
Okay.
Um but yeah, I don't really have anything bad to say about it.
I think so the reason I'm not giving it a full 10 would be that it just leaves me wanting a little something more, and I
Mhm.
can't
Mhm.
quite put my finger on it, and I remember feeling that way every other time I've watched it too. Like, it just there's something about it, and I think when I was younger, it was like, "I need to know more, I'm not ready for this film to be over," and
Yeah.
now I sort of feel like when I was watching it, it was that scene where Neil was lying to the teacher. It was that moment sort of just didn't quite land for me the way that
Mm.
that so, I mean, not that so my perspectives have changed, but I still feel sort of I leave the experience wanting just a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a part of me, and maybe it's not the right move, that wants to know what happens to them next, a little more of the assimilation
Mm,
Yeah.
of their experience. But that that I think it's fine that
yeah,
that we don't get that. Like we
yeah.
don't, like there's like you could, the two ways you could have done that is you end it like American Graffiti and you say what happened to them later.
Mm,
Mhm.
Or you have a framing device like Stand By Me, to where you have which I feel also wouldn't have worked, which, like the Richard, like you get, like knowing that the Ethan Hawke character is the one who's looking back on this and thinking, and
Right.
how it
mhm,
changed their lives.
mhm.
And I feel like that also would have been a detriment to the story, because you
Mhm.
Mhm.
have to kind of feel like the situation is inescapable. Like
Right.
we don't have the safety of having looked back on it,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the other thing that was hard for me, and I remember feeling this every other time I've watched as well, even as a young kid, being like, his dad needs to know it was his fault, that it was his
Yeah.
fault. It's not the teacher's
Uh-huh.
fault, and so there's no payoff in that way either, but I also understand why there isn't, because his father can't he'll never understand that no matter what anybody
Right.
does, he'll
Mhm.
never get there. And I think as a kid, especially as looking back on myself as a young kid, wanting to feel like I could change people's minds, or like if they just knew this, then they would change, or this, but that's not how the world works, that's not how
Mhm.
people work.
Mhm.
So I think that but it's hard because even now watching it, I'm like, "Oh, I just want him to know." I want I want that dad to know that he was at fault.
You know what'd
Yeah.
be interesting is if you had a power to teleport into works of fiction. If
Mm.
you could go into movies or things like that, and instead of doing it to change the events, you go, it's like, no, this asshole needs to know he's the bad guy. Damn it!
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That
Uh,
is such a good point. I'm glad that you brought that up because, yeah, and at the moment where he's like, for the request of Neil's family, there's going to be a full inquest into who's at fault, and it's like, but you're at fault.
we're like, "Neil, you should have just
Mhm.
written a letter. Why didn't you leave a letter?"
Yeah,
Dad, you were totally at fault.
Yeah.
love Neil.
Neil really let us
That's a good
down.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot,
That's a
Neil.
good point.
Way to cock it
Way to
up.
go, buddy.
Way to fail at everything.
So, what about a deep cut recommendation? Something that you would like if you like Dead Poet Society. Nathan, is yours Harry Potter?
It is not.
Okay, good.
I was leaning into that. So for mine, it's like, okay, so for me, I really responded, I suppose, to the story of like rebelling against conformity, of living in a world or a life, and you want to just break out and sing. No, it's not a musical. So I
I
was
would have
thinking,
been shocked.
I mean, there's a lot of really serious ones, but a fun version of this is Pleasantville,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
which is a great movie from the late '90s that I think doesn't um, get brought up often enough.
I love that movie.
Yeah. And it's definitely has a lot of great magical realism. Basically, Toby Maguire and Reese Witherspoon are zapped into Leave It to Beaver,
Mhm.
and then they start changing the world and giving people a way, to look outside of the conformity and um and and experience something beyond like the constrained format that they live in.
Oh, it's a great one. Good job.
You're welcome.
Good choice.
Thanks.
Megan, do you have a deep cut recommendation?
Yeah, so I have a couple because it's hard for me to decide. But I'm gonna go with just sort of sticking with the themes of school and young minds sort of being transformed. Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit. Yeah,
Yay!
really sort of a
Woo!
lighter, sort of more positive outcome at the end, right? But still similar ideas. And then another one that had a really big impact on me as a young person was Dangerous Minds. That was
Yeah.
the very first R-rated movie I ever watched, and,
Wow.
I don't know if it holds up as well. I haven't seen it in years,
Uh-huh.
but I'm inspired to watch it again.
Oh,
Nice.
those are great. Perfect. So mine is a Saturday Night Live sketch.
Yeah.
It's called Farewell, Mr. Bunting. So when you look it up, that's what
Uh-huh.
you'll search for. You can
Okay.
either search for Saturday Night Live Dead Poet Society sketch, or search it by name, Farewell, Mr. Bunting. But it is a parody of the last scene, where Mr. Keating comes in, and the boys all stand at their desks and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." It's a parody of that scene, and I don't want to give away what happens because the twist is so beautiful and perfect. I want you to look it up, and I want you to go watch this. It's a
I can't wait.
it's a great sketch called
Mhm.
Farewell, Mr. Bunting. And when you get to the surprise, it will all be worth it.
I love it. I love it.
Okay. So Megan, where can people find and support your artistic endeavors?
Oh, well, they can follow me on social media, I suppose. All of my handles are Megan Hughes Reaney. Um, and they can support the last movie ever made, which is
Yay.
uh,
Ooh.
which is just a wonderful piece of fiction, and will be released hopefully sometime next year.
Excellent.
Yay.
Nathan, any ways or people can support your artistic endeavors, including the last movie ever made?
Yes. So squishystudios.com is the easiest route to go. That's where you can see all our socials and links and stuff like that. And you can check out like the latest links for our movie, the last movie ever made.
Excellent. You can find me at nctphoenix.com or the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona. You can find us on the Instagrams and the Facebooks at Most Excellent Pod. And if you want more at this point, you want to hear more from us, you want more content, you want more of us on the discords and everything, do follow us on truestory.fm. You can become a member for just a few bucks a month. You get the episodes 1 week early. You get bonus content from us at the end, and you get discord servers with all kinds of fun discussion, not just of our show but of all the True Story FM shows. um, Thank you so much for listening and seizing the day with us. And when you're out there in the world, please keep the most excellent 80s movies podcast motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and party
Party
on.
on, dudes.
All right.